Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Sonny Armano. I'm the Group CMO Brand Atlas, and I will be your host for today's discussion. So, we will be in your presence for the next 42 minutes. So, this is going to be a good one. But allow me to introduce two people who are joining me today, two industry experts, two friends who are bringing very different, I would say, not different, complementary perspectives on the branded residence market. And I'd like to do ladies first. Dr. Akshar, would you like to introduce yourself and PKF Hospitality Group?
Thank you, Sunny. It's such a pleasure to be here. Thanks again for the kind introduction. I'm so excited. So I am the director of research at PKF Hospitality. Some of you may know us from previous events, etc. And yeah, PKF Hospitality is a leading advisory consultancy for the hospitality space. In addition to advising on hotels globally, we also provide strategic services for service living, student accommodation, etc. So branded residences is one of our newer fields of study, and I am very pleased to bring you our pilot research into the Florida market. So thanks again, and very excited to have this discussion with you.
Excellent. Mr. Ben?
Yeah, hi guys. Great to join you. Thanks for having us. I'm Ben Grin. I'm Global Director of Sales, Developments and Partnerships and CSO at Brand Atlas. We advise developers, hospitality groups, anything in the branded real estate space in the built environment. So we help create commercially successful branded residences projects. And we also bring brands into the market as well. We're based in Bangkok, head office is in Bangkok, but we're a truly global business, and we're really excited about our global strategic partnership that we've done with PKF and the report that we've put together that we're going to talk about today. And yeah, pleasure to see you all, and thanks for joining us.
All right. So today's discussion isn't really about Florida. It is about Florida, but it isn't. And you know why? And I'll tell you why. Because Florida is simply really the lens through which we will all explore the future of branded residences. It's one of the world's most active branded residence markets. I know people will argue Dubai is there, but we'll save that argument for later. Because Florida offers valuable lessons I think we can all learn from how it creates value, how it can accelerate sales, and what today's buyers are looking for, what tomorrow's buyers are looking for. It's like we have a crystal ball in front of us, and that's what we're going to share today, right? So let's dive in, right? So we've structured today's discussion around four questions, four questions that developers have asked us, and we assume this is probably your four questions among others. It's what is it? Do brands increase value in branded residences? Do brands actually accelerate sales? Which brands create the greatest commercial advantage? And what will tomorrow's buyer actually pay for? Right? I mean, these are the questions that I think you want to be answered, right? And everybody's got a different response to this depending where we're from, but we're here to share our insights and learnings. But let's begin first by understanding, you ask yourself, why Florida? Why has it become such an important benchmark, especially from our view, right? Look at this. 61 completed projects, 140 projects in the pipeline. It's a global capital magnet, global luxury benchmark, international buyer base. I think the numbers and facts sort of speak for itself, right? We'd love to show this together with Dubai, but this is really rich territory here. And all these numbers and facts, speaking of that, let's ask Dr. Akshara, who spent months analyzing this market, tossing around 15,000 data points. Why has Florida become one of the world's leading branded resident markets? And is there any lessons you can share with us today in other markets that can they learn from this?
Well, it goes back to exactly what you said, Sunny. I think the terminology used in terms of like the crystal ball, the lens, that's actually why Florida was an optimal starting point for us. And I think it reflects in the title of our report as well. It is essentially the playbook for the rest of the world. And a lot of it goes back to Florida's establishment as a luxury real estate market. It has just been one of the most organic, established, and mature branded residence spaces in the world. And its development reflects that. So you started with a major proliferation of the hospitality, the traditional hospitality branded residences that are focused on. When you think about a Florida branded residence, you're potentially picturing something coastal, centered around retirees or international investors, a very big part of it. And that was, the fertile base on the basis of which this market has now developed. Florida has now become, in addition to this established product from the hospitality side of the typical branded residence, it then opens up the market for a lot of experimentation. So then you have, in the last, let's say, 15 years, I wouldn't say 20, but 10 to 15 years, a lot of non-hospitality brands, whether it's automotives, fashion, luxury, lifestyle, food and beverage. We've recently seen Nobu enter the market. They have all launched pilot projects, debut projects, flagship properties in this space as a differentiator to the existing market proposition. And because there's such a high demand, because Florida is from the demand side, it's juxtaposed as a launching point and an entry point for an international investor who is, as you know, very mobile now, and capital is very mobile now. So what we are seeing is a very unique situation where it's essentially a very mature market, and yet the pipeline is expected to double in 5 years. So establishment, experimentation, lessons for the entire world. With respect to what can be learned, I don't think one webinar is enough. We have discussed it a lot, of course, in our report. But just like if I was to do it from the top of my head, a lot of growth of standalones. So standalones are 35% of the pipeline, as opposed to 28% of the total supply. And what that tells us is that there is a move away from this resort style integrated with the hotel, sort of branded residence, into something more privacy oriented, scarcity oriented, exclusivity oriented. We are seeing a lot of that reflected in the service proposition as well. So moving away from the typical luxury proposition of spas and wellness and private dining and gastro, and into more personalized services like, event planning. Vacation
Mhm.
planning, pet care is something we've seen surprisingly quite a bit. Family planning, so I think it really just comes down to how much opportunity there is for experimentation, for differentiation, and the explosive demand for branded residence properties from a highly mobile international buyer base.
Oh, no, that makes sense. I mean, although we'll talk about it later, but of course,
Hmm.
it's so attached to the buyers, right?
Oh God, yes,
They're
yeah.
building for that, but we'll touch on
Hmm.
that later. Thank
Hmm.
you. And you, Ben, from a commercial perspective, have you, when you speak to developers around the world, do they also look at Florida as a benchmark? And like, what are these conversations you're having with your clients?
Yeah, I think, the good doctor said it so well, and I want to pick up on a couple of her points. I mean, from an organic standpoint, developers aren't looking at Florida to copy Florida. They see it exactly as we've just said, as a benchmark. It's such a mature and competitive landscape. Um, if brand products and strategy and the operating model succeed in Florida, it's a very good case and um, a very good case of putting it forward globally. So yeah, it's the evidence is there and it works. The conversations we've been having over the past few years, they're no longer asking should we do branded residences. It's much more what brand will create the most commercial value in the space.
Hmm.
And from a Florida Playbook standpoint, as we've said, it has been, is no one's done it like they have. We've touched on Dubai, as you said earlier, Sonny. Um, and whether that North American epicenter of Florida and Miami translates as a playbook for Dubai, again, that's a totally separate webinar. But yeah, the commercial proposition is there and it's compelling and it works, in terms of sales velocity, long-term asset value. The brand becomes the commercial decision maker on it. So yeah, it's a very strong, compelling case study to look at.
Hmm.
Nice, nice. Thanks, Ben. I mean, you just said the word commercial, so let's shift the discussion to commercial outcomes that developers are trying to achieve. I mean, look, regardless of whether your project's in Miami, Bangkok, Dubai, Bali, you know, Tokyo, what have you, right? Every developer ultimately wants two things. I'm sure we can add a few more other points to this, but these are the two things that we always get. Will it increase value? Will it accelerate sales? Right. So let's begin with the value, right? Do brands increase value? I'm sure we all say yes, right? But what's the reason behind it, Dr. Shara? Your research demonstrates that branded residents command pricing premiums. Okay,
Mhm.
got that. But can you explain from all that 15,000 data points you were tossing around? What does it say? How significant are these premiums? Are there differences between brand categories? I know it's a loaded question, but this is, I think, a very important part of the webinar.
I think it's an extremely important question. So I'm just as a nutshell, I mean, yes, they do. Brands do increase value. Common industry knowledge will tell us that premiums can be anything from 20 to 45% across global markets. And there are good reasons behind that go beyond just, look, this is a Chelsea Football Club branded residence and I am a fan. There is a segment of simply brand loyalty, and there is evidence of, yeah, HNWIs who will purchase properties related to a specific brand, yes. But I think it's really behind, and a lot of people would also say this exact thing. It goes behind the operational promise behind the brand. There is an assurance of quality, there's an assurance of security, there is an assurance of an underlying infrastructure related to the brands. So if I am the target buyer segment, I happen to be a high net worth individual who is splitting my time across 3 or 4 different branded residences, whichever way, across, across different nations, different borders, and I leave properties um, basically locked up for months at a time. I want to be assured that a lock and leave concept is in place where there's an underlying infrastructure that assures me that there's security, there's safety, that my asset is looked after, there's maintenance, there's a repair cycle. When I come back, when I return, I can essentially just seamlessly, remove the time and the hassle of home ownership and re-enter my property and continue without wasting time or creating a hassle. I think, like, in very basic terminology, this is essentially what it is. It is the factor that a brand that promises quality, security, safety of my asset in investment terms and physical terms is present in order to look after what I have put my money into. And I think that's a large part of it. The second part, of course, is the lifestyle premium. So anything associated with an aspirational brand comes with a certain promise of quality, a standard of life, a standard of living. Nobu, you will probably never have any dearth of gastronomic options. Aman, the wellness proposition is excellent. So of course, this is a factor for a branded residence buyer. And then the last is the financial aspect, which is essentially the premium, the resale value is accounted for. But all of it, I think, entirely ties back to the brand. And we've said this many times. It's not enough to simply slap a logo on a building and call it a brand. There has to be the underlying proposition that has to be delivered. Hospitality brands will do it through service. That's how they differentiate themselves. That's how they do it by exceptional service and the ecosystem that is related to, the management and the staff. Non-hospitality brands will leverage in service, but will also reflect it in design and aesthetic, in various amenities pertaining to leading back to the brand. So it'll be reflected in the identity. But yeah, it has to be more than just the name. The brand label by itself is not going to be an assured increase of value.
No, I understand. You said the word premium, and I think some developers, when they hear premium, not saying those on the call, but some we spoke assume branding is just the answer. And like you said, it's just
Mhm.
putting the brand on the building. Uh, Brand, I mean, are there situations where I'm sure there is, but tell us where branding alone isn't enough?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's really important, and I coined a phrase when obviously going through the report and everything. But a great brand can amplify a great project, but it can't rescue a poor one. And the fundamentals need to be there and they need to be right. Everything from location to product to pricing, target demographic, everything has to line up. And this is where it's so important. And this is why we at Brand Atlas do what we do, from both a development standpoint and a brand standpoint. But that relationship between developer and brand is so hand in glove, and it's so important to get all those fundamentals right. But the biggest mistake developers make is thinking that a luxury brand will automatically increase their premium, as you know, as we've just discussed. In reality, it comes from brand fit and value. So yeah, there's a lot of factors that need to be taken into consideration. And as we've all said, and we've been saying for many years, throwing a brand on the side of a building and expecting a sales premium or a sales velocity or all the good things that the developers want from having and getting a brand and paying a lot of money for a brand 9 times out of 10, um, everything needs to stack up. It's a series of dominoes that if those dominoes aren't necessarily in the right order and moved out of place, you know, it doesn't fall the way that they should. So I think that's really important. A brand isn't just the strategy, it's an expression of it. So when a brand, buyer, and project all becomes perfectly aligned, that's where you create, again, back to the previous question, that's where the commercial value really comes in.
Excellent. So
Absolutely.
so it sounds like the buyers aren't just paying simply for a logo, and I think they know it, right? They're paying
Yeah.
for something much bigger, much
Mhm.
broader, right? Which is a nice segue to the next part, which is why why do brands actually create value, right? And this is what some of the key bullets that we got from the report, right?
Mhm.
Brands create value. Why? Through brand trust, gives the buyer confidence on it. It differentiates you from the building across the street, even if it's just as luxurious as yours. The perceived quality, risk reduction. I think that goes, and that's such a big word, especially in Miami. I won't mention brand names, but I think you know what I'm talking about. And then you got pricing power, right? I mean that
Mhm.
these are the things that really what brands do it. And speaking of branding, let's start with Ben first. If branding, like you said, is more than a logo, so what are these buyers actually responding to? What are the strongest brands out there, or brands out there consistently command higher values? Tell me.
Yeah, sure. Again, you know, it's touching back. I'm not trying to go back on all our previous points, but you know, they're not paying a premium for a logo anymore. They're paying for certainty. A trusted brand reduces perceived risk at the end of the day, and that's what it's all about. You know, these bullet points that you've put here, Sonny. You know, brand trust, the buyer confidence, the perceived quality, reduced risk that we've said, the pricing power, that all comes from brands, you know, from for international buyers, particularly those purchasing in markets that they're not necessarily so familiar with, or it's their first foray into it.
Mhm.
That brand gives the confidence to make the leap, to make the jump, to align with something that they recognize, that they know, that feels familiar. So that's where it's so important. It is that shortcut to trust, and it also decreases the time scales for decision making. So you know, they consistently command the highest values when delivering the aspirational side of the luxury and the brand premium that comes with that. So it's very compelling for a number of reasons that we've discussed. But ultimately, buyers don't aspire to own a brand; they aspire to live um, in the lifestyle that the brand represents. And I think that's really important to remember. Buyers align. You know, if you're a Four Seasons buyer, you're a Four Seasons buyer. You buy in Bangkok, you buy in London, you buy where the Four Seasons, whether it's a standalone Four Seasons residences or co-located with a hotel from a hospitality component, they buy into the brand, and that's important to remember.
Mhm.
No, 100%, 100%. So I think no question about value, but as we know, that's sort of one side of the equation, right? The
Yes.
Yeah,
other side is whatever developers, our clients ask you. So, can branding help projects sell faster, right? So let's talk about how branding actually affects sales, right? Again, from the study, this is what came out. It's branding helps with sales velocity, right? Absorption, and you touched on this earlier. Buyer confidence,
Mm.
global reach, right? If your brand is recognized, on the other side of the world, you're halfway there, right?
Mhm.
Marketing advantage, right? Maybe you don't have to shout as much because of the familiarity of the brand or the magnet the brand has on a certain audience, and reduce sales risks, right? Um, but Dr. Shara, from your Florida research that you really dove into, tell us about, sales performance. Do branded residents generally sell faster or just higher premium price?
Mhm. Um, I think with respect to Florida, as I mentioned, it is the demand is explosive and it's always been a luxury real estate hotspot. So clearly there is, in terms of faster, it would be harder to say. What I can say is that there's certainly more responsiveness from the international buyer segment for many of the reasons that we've gone into before. I think the first level of distinction is, of course, the destination itself. So, of course, this is a more global discussion, but when we speak about things like buyer confidence, it also really comes down to the safety and security of the destination itself. So, Florida is perceived as a very stable market for an international investor. It's a very safe bet. It is a consistent, well-performing market. So, of course, there is that additional confidence. It's also a very tax-friendly market, and that is a huge, huge selling point. So these are factors that make a huge difference. With
Yeah.
respect to brands itself, what I can tell you is I think it's quite interesting because when you look at the pricing, what we did find was that there is a difference in the way in the spread, let's say, of hotel brands versus non-hotel brands. So you will find a lot more consistent pricing, and the performance is a lot more consistent across price bands for hotels because the buyer proposition is relatively homogeneous. It's differentiated on the basis of services. When it comes to non-hotel brands, the potential disruptors of the market, the pricing is very, very exaggerated towards the higher end of the market. And this is primarily not because of an inherent difference in the value proposition. It's because these are flagship properties. These are iconic properties. These are marquee towers. They are debut properties. So there is that level of interest is developed on the basis of a very distinct sort of marketing proposition. So I think the difference is it's a quite a nuanced question, and I'm quite certain that it also differs destination to destination because the buyer target group differs destination to destination. But when we look at Florida specifically, what we find is a lot of evidence of consistent interest in the typical proposition that is there. And it does have certain advantages over non-branded luxury residential in terms of buyer confidence that are reflected in the international buyer segment. And then there is, and a sort of the disruptive products, the disruptor products that come from the non-hospitality brand, they are operating very differently. Those are, yeah, you kind of have to evaluate them differently.
Sure. And you, Ben, you sort of touched this in the last slide, but why do branded residents often achieve stronger sales velocity? I mean, what's the
Yeah,
quick one on
yeah.
that?
So as like Shara said, it's really important to remember that the biggest barriers to any property purchase globally, not just branded residence, is uncertainty. So a
Mhm.
recognized brand removes a huge amount of that uncertainty, and obviously, through removing that uncertainty, it then increases the sales velocities by having that confidence that goes with purchasing into what a brand can do. The second reason a strong brand can help sell faster, it opens the project up to an international audience. So it makes that
Mhm.
scale that much greater, that makes that global appeal become so much more when a brand is associated with a project. And not just, as we've touched on, and not just the hospitality providers that have been doing this for so long and been doing it so well and really wrote the playbook for branded residences. As again, as the good doctor said, the disruptors coming into the space, the lifestyle brands, the fashion brands, the automotive brands, and everything that goes with it. Um, you've only got to put maybe we shouldn't use this as an example here, but a certain car brand on the side of a building in
Mm.
Florida that really gives that confidence and trust and removes that uncertainty. So that naturally increases both premium and sales velocity. So
Okay,
yeah, I think that's really
that's
important.
great. I mean, so I think we can conclude branding clearly influences both pricing and absorption, right? Obviously,
Yeah.
there's a lot of factors that come into that, but does every brand actually deliver the same commercial outcome? That's also the million-dollar question, which leads us to this slide, which is hospitality versus lifestyle. I call them next gen brands. Dr. Shah calls it emerging. I like next gen; sounds cooler.
Yeah,
But
Disruptor, I think you said, wasn't it?
yeah,
Yeah.
so
they did. Yes.
yeah, but from looking at this now, hospitality, the hotels we know has ones who actually started this whole movement, but the great lifestyle brands that are really making a mark globally. Then we have the emerging from sports, wellness, private clubs, and even some in this list that we haven't even thought of. Now, what changes are you seeing, Dr. Shara, the types of brands entering this sector?
So with respect to the emerging brands, so we're seeing a lot of, there is a at this point, you did say next gen, and it is the next gen. But I think there's actually quite a lot of presence now, in the non-hospitality branded segment of fashion, automotive, and design-specific brands. And I think it again comes back also to the appeal of the destination. So, Florida, Miami is the home of F1 racing and the
Mm,
fashion and design capital as well of the Americas. So it makes sense to find a buyer segment, a very affluent, mobile, lifestyle-centric segment, which has been typical to the region that buys into that. With respect to more emerging brands, I think it's worth mentioning that there are factors like they go back to the destination. It's like premiumizing the waterfront. For example, Riva Yacht Brands is in the market. So again, that comes back to a tie back of the destination with a premium product, and it's reflected in the brand and the accommodation. So it goes back to buyer interest. I would say hospitality is the dominant product in the market. The split, I believe, is 70-30 at the moment. The
mhm.
report has more recent figures, but 70-30 is about the split, and that's because yeah, it's a question of the dominant product proposition. I do imagine that we'll be seeing a lot more differentiating in the market. I think I've seen in the chat as well, there's discussion about more mid-scale brands, more upscale brands that are entering this space. And then that will obviously there will be distinctions and differentiators in the ultimate product proposition. Maybe we see a move away from the overt sort of very premium wellness spa yoga pilates sort of proposition that is flooding the market and move towards something more nuanced, something more niche. Maybe the focus moves away marginally from this dominant like exclusive restaurants and private dining and gastro into something which is more personalized and nuanced as well. So as we've touched upon so many times, there's the pipeline is set to double. The space is immense, the potential is immense. And I think we are seeing these trends not just in Florida, but across the world. We're seeing it in many hotspots, many markets where we're seeing a widening of the proposition. And a lot of it comes back to, on the supply side, renewed confidence in this product and what it can offer, and an exploding buyer segment that is moving very quickly across the world. And that means there are going to be a lot more brands that offer something aspirational to a much broader segment of people, sports fans,
Yep.
pop culture, and jewelry and lifestyle, and God knows what. I'm excited myself to see what comes out.
100%, 100%. Ben, real quick, I mean,
Yeah.
developers, we've been in the same room. They come and they ask, what brand should I get? Is that the best and right question?
No,
Yep. All
it's
right.
the honest answer.
All right. Go for
The very short answer, the right brand depends on so many things. It's got to be weighed up with location, the project, specific project fundamentals that sit behind it, what buyer demographic they're hoping to hit. We know very well, and we've gone down this route as a business where we go into a meeting with developers that have a very firm idea of a specific brand or specific segment of brand they would like, which is why we do what we do. And we get to the point where we advise them and on something totally different that we know is going to work through the stages and the processes that we go through to get to that point. Um, so I think a better question is which brand is right for the project rather than which
Correct.
brand is right for the
100%.
developer. Um,
100% spent. And of course, we all know this all leads to the audience, right? If anybody talks to me, I always talk about audience, 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 because that's the one
yeah,
who's actually putting the money down for it, right? So,
you drilled
um,
it into me, Sonny.
yes, exactly, exactly. So,
They're real estate.
buyers are changing. The buyers are changing, right? If you can say yesterday before it was just simple, where is it and what's the product, what's the brand? But today's buyer they're a bit more complex. Yes, the brand, yes, the location, but they're asking about the services. Is there a wellness? What kind of wellness? Let's not go down that rabbit hole. The community. Do I want to be part of this community? What are the experiences that's going to be part of all this? I mean, this is your buyer today and tomorrow. So, Dr. Akshara, I mean, what changes are you seeing the buyer expectations? I mean, we're sort of running close to time, but what changes do you see that is worth sharing?
Oh, you've touched on so many things. We may have to have like a third webinar,
Sorry.
um, or go into it more deeper in next
Yes.
week as well. But yes, I mean there is a very strong. I don't want to, like you said, I don't want to go too much into it. But let's talk about wellness for just 30 seconds. There is a very, very strong shift away from the traditional wellness component into something more long term. We're talking about, the word longevity is thrown around a lot. I think in many times it bleeds into wellness as a definition. I consider longevity to be based on a long-term sort of healthcare vision, which is about preventive healthcare. It is about personalization, which also goes back into the service aspect. So you're talking about something like a nutritionist, something like a personal trainer who's curating your fitness plans. You're talking about a certain, tech forward installations, hyperbaric oxygen chambers, IV injections and peptide lounges and all these things. So what I am saying is there is now it's going mainstream, this move into what we call longevity. I consider it long-term healthcare. And I think that's coming. It reflects quite strongly in Florida because it is also traditionally a retiree destination. When we talk more broadly about services, I think we are seeing trends of like a more specific, more precise demands from the customer side. So as we've talked about before, the broad proposition was always luxury, hospitality-oriented luxury. So white glove services, a concierge, housekeeping and laundry, private gastro, exclusivity, all these things. And now I think it moves more towards personalization. It's moving more towards convenience. So people expect very specific things like I would like when I have delivery services, I would like a designated space or person to handle my packages. I'm planning an event. I want flexible spaces. I want to have a centralized app so I can plan home care maintenance. I want access to basically staff. I want full-time staff so that I do not have to undertake the hassles of homeownership. My premium is my time and a lack of stress. And that, I think, are the things that are reflecting both in the wellness and the service proposition. Remove the hassle of private ownership, of home ownership, which is something you will not get in non-branded luxury residential. Remove that because there is an underlying ecosystem to do that for me, and give me back my time, reduce my stress, make it easier for me to move from place to place and come back to, a full-fledged home. And I think that's where it's heading.
100%. Very demanding consumer.
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, but
Ben,
then
real quick. I just want to make sure we can get a couple questions in later.
Mhm.
Um, are buyers purchasing something bigger today than just residence? I think that's an obvious. I think we can guess the answer, but
Yeah, for sure. And I just think, just back to that last question, quick, you said very demanding consumer, very, very discerning consumer now rather than demanding.
correct.
Yes, absolutely. 20 years ago, people were buying square foot and location. and they were building a lifestyle around that. Today, as again we've just touched on, they want the convenience, they want their time brought back, they want the community, they want the well-being, the peace of mind, everything that goes with being in the branded residences. So what buyers are really investing in is the experience at the end of the day, as well as the brand. And
100%,
it's a way of
100%.
living that aligns and aspires to what they want to be. So yeah, sure, I'll keep that short and
All
sweet,
right.
but that.
No. Short and sweet is perfect. So in a nutshell, so luxury really is involved. It's not just a real estate. It's buying into this lifestyle ecosystem, right? Which is like Dr.
Absolutely.
Shower says, a totally separate webinar altogether, right? So we usually end with the 5 and 5, right? No, it's not basketball. It's 5 predictions for the next 5 years. And this is what we called from the study, and some of you can guess probably 3 or 4 of this, wellness, standalone, lifestyle, community, and this AI enabled, Dr. Ashara touched on it earlier about, what demands that consumers may have. And, AI is part of our lives whether we want, like it or not. So one prediction from you, quick answer, in 5 years, is this what you see it? Is there something you want to add to this? Then we can move into the Q&A.
Oh, absolutely. Very absolutely spot on with the predictions. Wellness, longevity, we've talked about all this. I do want to make one more observation that's not on the slide. Ecosystems, especially in urban locations. So because it's again opportunistic development with scarce spaces, so we are now seeing a lot of evidence, especially with brands like Ando Living, of individual standalone residential projects, and in the central using a hub and spoke model and a sort of clubhouse or a central ecosystem where it houses your amenities and your service proposition, and it services multiple standalone residences. In the case of urban markets, this makes a lot of sense, and I think we're going to be seeing a lot of examples of it in the future. So that would be my prediction: ecosystems.
Excellent. Ben, what's your one prediction, or is there something here you just want to put your hat on?
Yeah, well, there's a few things. I mean, everything on that slide, I want to put my hat on for sure. And ecosystems, I think, as you rightly just said, 100%. But I think we're going to see huge amounts of growth in the standalone sector, and the wellness as well for obvious reasons. So it's going to be enormous. That percentage of standalone. We've already seen the upward trajectory of where that's going, and it's only going to accelerate and continue from a standalone proposition for sure.
Absolutely, because exclusivity is the premium. As much as there's an advantage with sharing, amenities and services with the hotel space, the truth is that most branded residence buyers would like their own space, which they do not necessarily share with short stay guests.
Absolutely.
100%. 100%. All right, we're not so bad. We're 4 minutes from time. There's some questions here. Needless to say, you can reach out to us anytime. One of the questions is, what's your view on tech brands and branded residents? I think I can take that. If it's a brand, it's got a following, let's build it, right? Honestly, that's the way. I mean, I think that it's depending. I mean, if you look at the Trump Tower, it's probably one of the number one selling towers in India. Don't ask me why. It's a brand, it works. So that's what they're looking for: sales velocity and confidence. Right? This is an interesting question. What do you think of branded built to rent versus built to sell model, Ben? What do you think?
It's the future.
It's coming. Yeah.
It's the future for sure. It removes so much of everything that we've just discussed from the purchase and from a rent standpoint as well. It gives you a long-term viability with a brand to also live, but without purchasing. So it's going to happen. It's the future. We're working on something quite exciting. I think I know who asked that question. So yeah.
All right. No, I think just to sort of close also, I think someone mentioned earlier about brand. I think to me, one thing is when you say branded residence, it doesn't say luxury in the front. It's just one segment, right? So if it's a brand that attracts a certain audience and a certain demographic, then you're okay, right? So that's why we see that we're at the tip of the iceberg. Sure, everything stops up there with luxury, but it all cascades down, right? You have to give one piece of advice to a developer starting a branded residence today. What would it be?
May I take this one?
Yeah,
For
go for it.
may
Yeah,
I start with this one and then invite Ben's perspective?
yeah,
I would say the most important thing is really and it sounds a little, broad, but you have to know your buyer segment. Yeah, various destinations. I wrote a paper on this recently, which I'm also happy to share with anybody who is interested. Various hotspots, wealth magnets, be it Dubai, Saudi Arabia, Florida, they attract different types of affluent buyers with different motivations, and you have to target your proposition correctly. The type of buyer segment who's interested in a family specific branded residence, and one who's interested in something more lifestyle oriented, someone who's interested in a more investment based perspective, they're not going to respond to the same positioning, the same branding, the same marketing message. So the first thing is to understand your buyer segment, understand your destination, and then proceed accordingly.
For sure, for
okay.
sure. And
Uh,
also get in if you're just starting out in branded residences, it's about get in touch with us early doors. That's where we can really add value and help and walk you through the whole process.
there you go. And I think ask yourself why you want to get in branded residences in the first
For
place,
sure, for sure.
right? What's your reason and vision? What should the Caribbean do to increase its presence in the market? Mm,
I
yeah,
mean, that's a whole separate webinar to talk about the different
Yes,
regional
absolutely.
locations we can
Research
do.
yeah.
is ongoing.
Yeah.
But I
Other
think
one,
again, yeah,
yeah.
it comes with respect to differentiation, and I think it's also a broader topic of when we speak about the destination, it has to be an attractive destination first and foremost for a certain specific high net worth individual segment, and then the discussion flows from there. So I'm certainly interested in doing broader research on the Caribbean.
Okay. Do you see any time in the future where the lifestyle brand partners with a hotel brand for services and rental format, making the asset profit asset and will not in use?
So was that a question relating to rental programs and going back into rental pools?
I think it's a mix. It's also about putting together a lifestyle brand with a hotel brand.
We're seeing it at
Yeah.
the moment. I mean, we're working very closely with a lot of traditional hospitality providers that have trailblazed in this space and been the first to market. And that's not to say that we've coined this phrase "house of brands," as you know, Sonny, that
Yeah.
comes and it encompasses and sits over the top of everything. So, of course, you can have hospitality brands with a. You've seen it in Dubai as well. I mean, and in Florida for that matter. There's hospitality brands with certain beach clubs with brands on that are very different from the
Yeah.
hospitality, the lifestyle brands that carry the beach club name. So, yeah.
And then Dr. Akshar, there's another question about Caribbean. I think we addressed that. We'll have to unpack that later on.
Mhm.
Mr. Miguel Espada. Then we have a question, Dr. Akshar, based on your research, what do you think will be the biggest trend in branded residence in the next 5 to 10 years? I think you said that.
Certainly, based on what we have seen, as I mentioned, branded ecosystems are certainly going to be a big topic of in the urban spaces. I definitely would put my money on that. And Ben also mentioned the rise of standalone. So these are certainly trends we're seeing. Other than that, broadly, I think longevity is a very safe bet. Just based on the fact that we are looking at a buyer segment that is very, very wellness focused, is looking at preventive healthcare, is going to, it's in many destinations, it is essentially the retiree segment. So a sort of larger integration of functional healthcare and branded living is probably on the table in the mid to long term.
Okay. Maybe we'll take one more question for Ben.
Would it be
What is
possible?
the biggest mistake you see developers make when choosing a brand?
Sorry, so I missed that. Say that again, Sonny.
What is the biggest mistake you see developers make when choosing a brand partner?
Great question. Again, another whole webinar. But developers come into the space or come in to have discussions with us with a brand that they've specifically got in mind that resonates for them, that suits them, that they think is the brand that they want to carry on the side of their building. When in actual fact, as much as they are building, a lot of these projects are legacy projects, and they're doing it for them. The brand's got to suit the buyer demographic and the location and everything else. So I think it's really important that developers keep an open mind, go through the process, work out which brand is going to carry the sales velocities and the greatest premium for where they are, depending on what location and where they are in the world. A lot of these brands have mandates to be in specific markets and areas. So there's a real good chance that, 9 times out of 10, the brand that they want will work and we can get for them. But it's about keeping an open mind for sure.
Here's another question. When comparing a branded to a non-branded residence, does the increase of associated HOA costs become a challenge for the project sales?
Um, it's got to be considered, but
I think
no,
there's
I
a
mean,
larger discussion to be had around the
Yeah.
yeah.
involvement of HOAs, especially in destinations like the US, where there is, the let's say the power dynamics are quite tilted towards the favor. So um, yeah, I think it's really more when we talk about their involvement, the challenge is more in terms of transparency and multiple stakeholder management, because that can become somewhat challenging down the road if things remain ambiguous. So
Yeah.
again, as we've said, probably a whole other webinar. But I think, yeah, the cost is a consideration, but it's really more about clarity and the understanding of the involvement of multiple stakeholders.
I don't know if we have time to go through this question, but we're talking a lot about wellness and longevity. Can we quickly go through a business case or a project that you've worked on?
For sure. Reach out to us and I'll happily go through a
Mhm.
business case on wellness for you.
Okay, okay. Another question on HOA is who is managing it, developer or brand? Lots of confusion and cross-border laws on this are different.
That's exactly the
The
challenge that,
cross-border
yeah.
laws. So it could go either way, developer or brand.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I think generally the onus falls more on the developer and the property management firm that is dealing directly with the residents, because it is the resident representative, the HOA.
Mhm.
But yeah, of course, there's an impact on the brand operation as well.
Okay. Okay. So there. Thank you again. Appreciate everybody's time. And I was going to say good night, good afternoon, good day, good morning, wherever you're in the world.
Whatever applies,
Thank
yeah.
you so much. Really appreciate it. We really appreciate you. And stay tuned for the next one. We got something really cool coming up. So watch out. Have a great day.